All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Increasing Productivity in the Digital Workplace. My name is Ashley Limbers, and I'm going to be the moderator. I'm the marketer here at TCS, and I'm excited to be hosting the session today. Total Computer Solutions is a full-service provider of IT support and services, including network security, cloud computing, network administration, managed backup services in Central North Carolina. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Andy Purcell. Andy is our business consultant, and he has over 20 years of IT and security consulting experience. He's a graduate of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he additionally holds certificates in VMware, Citrix, EMC, and is a Cisco Business Value Specialist. This invaluable combination of education and experience helps Andy find TCS clients the right solutions to grow their business. So before I hand the mic over to Andy, I have a few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. First, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session, and it will be emailed out to you afterwards. Next, we'd love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have a question for our speaker, please feel free to type them into your question box on the Zoom control panel, and we'll be answering those at the end of the session. And if we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up with you afterwards. There's also going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. If you could please take that, that helps us improve our presentations and events. And so without further ado, Andy, I'll hand things over to you.
All right, thank you, Ashley. I appreciate everyone being here today. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully we'll have some quality information to share with you today and work toward understanding how to create increase productivity in the digital workplace where we're all working today. So there have been a lot of changes that we'll talk about, and a lot of fun stuff that's happening every day seemingly. And so we'll start moving through that process and talking about it over the next 30 to 40 minutes. So just to give you an overview of where we're headed throughout the next little while, we're going to talk about the evolution of the workplace. I think there have been a number through history that we'll talk about, and obviously I think we're in the midst of another big evolutionary step forward. So we'll talk about that. We'll also go over tools. Some of these have been around for a while. Some of them are new in the past couple of years. And I think most of them, the biggest example everyone will recognize is one that has been around that has exploded during their recent evolution. We then want to look at how we can leverage some of this technology, leverage the power and how flexible that we've become, and using some of those tools in a new way to make us better and help us move forward in more productive environments in our individual workplaces. And then last, we're going to plan for the next steps. So not only what this means going forward for this year, but perhaps some ideas looking out into the future. So with that in mind, I want to talk specifically to begin with today about the evolution of where and how we work and who is doing that work. I think that the image behind the title here is probably a fairly common one for most of us. You've got a gentleman here sitting on a laptop. He's got a cell phone beside him. That's really all the tools that he needs to work wherever, whenever, and however he wishes. And so that's sort of where we've become, what we've become recently. And then even more so over the last 2 years working in a pandemic environment. But I want to go through that and keep that in mind as we go to this next slide and you see where we began, right? This is probably our parents in some cases working in this sort of environment. This is probably, what do you figure, late 60s, maybe, I'm sorry, early 60s, maybe late 50s or something. But all those gleaming typewriters sitting on desks, and I think that thing under the cover may be a dictation machine or something. I'm not entirely sure. But it definitely is a difference from this fellow working in our modern environment to where we are there. And obviously the big factor that caused that shift is the personal computer and eventually the servers that came along with that. They no longer have one computer to fit in that single office in the back of this image. We're having them under our desks in some cases with more power than that. So I think if we look at the evolution of the PC and servers, we can see how we got to this point from that point. Now, the way that we work today is going to vary by our industry. If you think about the different ways that we work, and to think about who we are and what types of business we are, if you're working in healthcare, you're working in a very different method than you are in the legal industry or in the manufacturing industry, or in a CPA's office. So if we take a look at those just briefly, think about that attorney, his biggest concern is documents readily at hand, documents electronically so that they can be shared. How's he able to work with his clients, other attorneys, opposing attorneys? And so the important things for him are really availability and accessibility. So that's going to guide and dictate the methods that he uses as he goes through his day. If you have someone who's in a CPA firm, let's say you've got a lady, as we do as a client, who is a CPA at a big firm, they're very application intensive. So in this lady's firm, she has 20 applications maybe that they're using for clients' taxes. It varies if it's an individual, if it's a business, the type of business, the type of industry, who they have to file with, or the method they have to go through to file. So that CPA office has a different environment. If you're in the healthcare industry, you're throwing in other wrinkles that came along as we went through CPAs. They have some requirements for compliance. As you get into the healthcare industry, it's HIPAA. So it's reporting, it's storing of data for a longer period of time. You also have lots of the devices that you use in the medical, the healthcare industry are now web-based, or perhaps they're communicating via Bluetooth, but you do have lots and lots of technological advancements in that area as well. And then probably the area that it's reaching into most recently is manufacturing. So you think of manufacturing sort of like that old picture of The Office. You think about a steel plant or something from the 40s and the 50s in that World War II and post-World War era. So today, that shop floor looks a lot different. You may have a plasma cutter that is driven electronically by a PC sitting beside it. You might have guns to do barcoding, to do scanning, to track material as it moves through, to track your finished goods, and that's connecting back to your ERP system. So I think you're finding in today's environment, even in the manufacturing industries, technology is a bigger part than it was 10 years, 15, 20 years ago. The next driver really that comes in is how your customers want to work. Again, if we run through that same brief little pattern of industries, if you go through the legal industry, a lot of times those customers are their clients, but in some cases their customer, if you put that in quotes, may be the courts, it may be opposing counsel. So therefore, the folks they're dealing with outside are going to have different requirements. So the flexibility to send those documents and that information electronically is going to be critical in this day and age. As we move through and think about a CPA, everything that's being filed today is electronic. All right, so the ways they work compared to that adding machine from the 1960s picture is pretty dramatically different today. Healthcare. I remember as a child going to the doctor and it was stethoscopes, and today it's MRI machines. So you think about that, and again, those industries are governed by their compliance issues. And you look at manufacturers, they're going to have probably a typical list of customers that they work with, and they've been using things like EDI to communicate for 20 years or so. But now it is more and more real time. So not only on their side, what are they keeping in real time supply as far as their raw materials, but also customers real time, customers checking orders. We do that internally. Our customers are able to use the same ticking system and to view it in the same way that we do. And so you're able to have an instant access and updates. So you think about huge differences in the way we interact with our customers. And all of those are really affected by the resources at hand. Okay, obviously, if you're an attorney and you're going to bring in a new product, you're able to adjust the rates to cover that. So getting new resources are probably not very difficult, but you do have to make sure every attorney has got a laptop. Each one may also have a desktop. They each have access to wherever you're storing the documents. More and more attorneys are on the road or working from home. So those resources, where do you put your server? What kind of server do you use? How do you back that up? What kind of access? Those are big issues. CPA firms, they still kind of like to have a server in the corner they can pat on the head and know what it's doing. Even though they're now filing everything electronically, they do still like to have it in-house. The medical, you're going to have a little bit of both. You probably have applications, maybe entire applications for scheduling or for medical records that could be cloud-based or could be internet-based. But I'm sure there are still practices, I know there are, that we work with, who also like that ability to go in there and look in the closet and see the server running. So the resources vary. There is a shift and it is changing, as you can imagine, and we'll go over some of those here as we go. But understand these three components: the industry, the customer, and the resource are the big drivers as we figure out how we're going to work in this modern age. Another real impact, especially if I could speak personally, in my case, over the last 2 years that we've been in pandemic mode, have really been the virtuality of what we do. Everyone had to work at home, and maybe half the folks have come back in the office. Maybe half the phone or people are working at home. I know I have Monday meetings, so I'm in the office on Monday. I'm doing this presentation for my office today. I may or may not be back in here again until next Monday, depending on what I have. Virtual meetings. And again, going through our litany there, attorneys absolutely doing virtual meetings. That had begun before we were forced into it. It's probably the norm for most attorneys that do some number of meetings virtually. Even if you look at court proceedings, they're being done electronically, being done virtually. If you move through CPAs, they don't have to have a lot of face-to-face meetings, and certainly not initially, and if things go well. So they can be almost all virtual once you have the initial meeting. Move into the medical industry. I did a telehealth visit last week to get a prescription renewed. We're doing more and more of that. Certainly if you're working in a facility that's a residential facility, you're going to be able to see people face to face, but maybe they're the ones having meetings with doctors externally. Manufacturing, you're seeing more and more of that can be done virtually. That is still largely a face-to-face industry, but I think you're seeing some movement there. Again, speaking for my industry, I went through a year of almost all virtual meetings, and for me, it was great. It allowed me to save time. I wasn't traveling as much. So for me, it worked very well. For most people, maybe this is a hybrid office. Okay, and you probably all know people, whether it's in your organization or whether it's friends and family, but they're working in a hybrid mode. So they may do as I do and come in a couple of days a week and then work from a remote office from home the rest of the time. That hybrid office is going to include some ability to do that. Heavy reliance on a cell phone, heavy reliance on the internet. Hopefully that has a VPN on it for protection. We'll discuss security a little bit later. But that hybrid office or that hybrid environment is going to be more and more a part of what we do. And there will be some industries that simply don't go back full time. I have a client who was getting ready to build a new office building that they were going to own rather than rent. It was going to be a many $million-dollar project. And that is totally on hold now. And they're thinking if they build it at all, it will be half the size. So that's the kind of hybrid environment that we see ourselves in now and moving toward increasingly. As we move into collaboration, now you ask, what does that really mean? I mean, we all collaborated and worked together before. Now we hear it in a technology sense. What does collaboration really mean? So to my mind, and the way we think about it on our part of the world, collaboration is the ability to access documents, files, videos like we're dealing with here, and being able to access those along with other people at the same time and have those changes recorded independently of who's recording them. So we're all seeing the same version of that document or that video or that file. Okay, so if we begin with that as our basis, we think about applications out there that allow us to work together. If one person makes a save to a document, everyone sees it immediately. Collaboration does also still mean what we're doing here today. It means we're getting together in a room. In this case, Zoom is our tool. It may be Teams. It may still be a conference call on a cell phone, but we have individuals collaborating with one another in person rather than via a document. And so that's the other meaning we want to think about. But we're going to see that continue to grow and move and become a part of what we do. The big one, everybody likes toys, right? So the big one that we want to talk about last is device independence. I have my phone right here with me. Obviously today for business, it goes most everywhere that I go. But we think about that independence. I used to be tied to that desk. Think about our 1960s picture. It literally cannot work away from the typewriter, the dictation machine, the adding machine. We certainly have moved into an era now where we can work a bit, but maybe we're still tied to a physical desktop sitting beside our desk. I would think most people in the last 2 years have moved away from that model to a laptop or an ability to dial in from home on a machine. And then the next step really is using our phones as those devices. We have tablets, we have phones. Today, your fridge can order your groceries for you. So the device independence is upon us. It's with us, and it's only to continue to move. And the more we're able to use those collaboration tools, that device independence is going to allow us to work anywhere, anytime. I'm not ashamed to say that I have done work from the beach before because the devices allow me to do that. And even though I'm on vacation, I'm able to contact the office. I'm able to be in part of meetings with the right background, of course, and and make sure that I'm able to work from anywhere, anytime. I do business in the middle of the night. I was up watching the Olympics last week and putting together proposals for companies because it's typical downtime that I'm able to use because of my device independence. So as we look at all of those ways to work, it really comes down to how do we do it? What do we need to use? And I'm going to show a slide with about 6 applications. We could probably come up with 10 others that we use, but it's a starting point. If you've got some ideas, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we could talk about them at the end. But we look at these, and some of these are new, as I mentioned. Some of these have been around for a long time. And the rock star of the pandemic has been Zoom. People have used Zoom for probably 5 years, 8 years, maybe 10. I don't know how long they've been around, but Zoom became a lifeline, not only for business. I don't know how many meetings I did, how many webinars like this I've done, how many conference calls with clients, how many personal calls I did. I saw Saturday Night Live via Zoom, right? They were using it. And we did a birthday call or birthday party virtually for a friend. You see lots of kids having virtual parties and things like that. So Zoom has been the big winner of all of this. We'll see where that goes once we get fully back to normal when that happens. But look at the other ones. Upper left there is Cisco's WebEx product. It is sort of the grown-up Zoom. Been around for a while. It's actually something that I worked with a great deal when I was working in the Cisco world. And it is the heavy-duty, beefy one that you use for a large corporation. Governmentally, they use a lot of Cisco. A lot of your media, if you watch on TV, they'll use WebEx for that. As you step down from there, we've had Skype has been around for years, specifically doing video calls, kids in college, people away in the military, family across the country, that kind of thing. It was purchased by Microsoft. So it is not the go-to really that it used to be, but it's a great example of the evolution of a product through this. We look at GoToMeeting, and there are other go-to products that you can use, but GoToMeeting is the one people know best. It's been around for a while. It has had a resurgence. I've done a couple of calls with people on GoToMeeting. They certainly did not make the big leap that Zoom did, but it is still something that's out there. So I would reference that as another tool. We talked about Zoom. We will talk about Slack here at the end. Slack is another collaboration platform with Skype, with communication, with the text messages that go along with it. It's maybe a little more hip and cool, if you will, than some of the others. But the other big winner through all of this, I will say, is in the middle there is Teams. So Teams has had a massive impact. It is a Microsoft product if you're not already using Teams. It does video. You can do video calls. We use it internally for our meetings, staff-wide, for everybody who's not in the building. You're able to type messages as you go through and as you work. So it's really great to be able to have a real-time conversation outside of the presentation. You can use it, as we mentioned, as a collaboration tool because you can share documents. You're not going to work within that document while you're on a Teams call or a Teams meeting, but you certainly can share that document. You can display it. You can take over and do a presentation, share your screen like I'm doing here. So it's probably the other winner along with Zoom out of this whole thing is how many folks have really embraced Teams. I do highly recommend it, primarily because of the close relationship with Outlook, as well as the rest of the Office suite. I can include a spreadsheet. I can go out and attach an email. I can schedule my meeting via Outlook. So the collaboration is very, very tight within the Microsoft family. Productivity tools. What are we using? So we've given you the how, we've given you the way, and now what are we doing with it? Okay. The biggie here, upper left-hand corner, is SharePoint. SharePoint, another Microsoft family product, ties in with Teams, ties in with Outlook, ties in with the other Office applications. You can use this for storage of files. The real advantage here is it is a way to store, work with, and update files in a multiple collaborative session with other people. So those of us on this call could go pull a document up in Skype, all look at the same document. If I make a change or Ashley makes a change, we all see that change appear. So it's tremendous. You can use it along with your OneDrive for your storage. Okay, OneDrive really does your personal documents on your PC. You can use Skype in the same way for your corporate documents. It doesn't take the place of a server or a backup, but it's a piece of that puzzle. There are lots of others out there. DocuSign, if you work in the real estate industry or if you bought a house or anything else recently, you use DocuSign to electronically sign that agreement. And it's a much, much easier way to share those forms back and forth, apply your documents without having to be face-to-face. And then I think we've really become, a big user of that here in the last 2 years. QuoteWorks and Quoter in particular are just like they sound like. They're tools that someone in any industry could use, really. We use them in our industry, but I'm thinking about contractors sending out quotes, manufacturers sending out quotes. You're able to upload your database of products. You're then able to price those, bring in customer information from third parties. There's a web version as well as a local version of those. So you're able to create those quotes very easily. And I think that's something that has really happened. The web version, obviously, you can do from anywhere, wherever you're sitting. So that's a big advantage for me to be able to do that. ConnectWise and Salesforce they're kind of odd beasts. They began really as customer management systems. They have really grown into company-wide management systems, contact systems, billing systems, order placement, order fulfillment. So if you're looking for an application to run your business side of things, ConnectWise and Salesforce are great tools that have come through this pandemic much, much stronger than they began. And I think in both cases, they have add-ons to perform other functions within business. I know we use some of the ConnectWise security functions that their business has as the next generation security endpoint detection and response, security operations center. ConnectWise offers those security tools that other platforms simply don't. So conversation for later in the presentation, but if you're not using EDR and SOC, that is something that you're going to have to be. As we go into our discussion of insurance later, you'll see why and what it affects your premium if you do not have that. So one of the things we can really do is leverage flexibility with all of these tools. And if we run through these, you're probably doing some portion of these today. Okay, you probably have something in the cloud. Certainly on your phone, all those pictures are being backed up somewhere, whether it's iCloud or it's to to Google or somewhere else. But the cloud allows you to have your data, your backups stored somewhere, whether it's Azure, whether it's at Google, whether it's AWS from Amazon. It's storing all of those in a central location that can be accessed externally. So how do I work from the beach? I work through the cloud. I work through an Azure server. I work through a remote desktop server. We'll speak about in just a second, but that's how you work offsite. How am I doing my 10 o'clock quotes during the Olympics or during a basketball game? Well, I'm doing that because I've got cloud tools that allow me to work just as I'm sitting in the office. Okay. Remote desktop server is another great example. So perhaps it's a single application that really needs to live on a server because of a database piece of it or database functionality. So it may not yet be a great client for the cloud, but you can start up a remote desktop server in your office so that that database and the application do reside on the same box, but you're able to extend access out. And if I've got a VPN, which I do on my laptop, I can connect from home directly to the server where in our case, QuoteWorks lives, and I can create proposals for clients still working on a physical server, but one that sits here. Now, if you've chosen to go the cloud route, you're connecting directly to the cloud, but this is an alternative for those applications, either because of age or database or size, are not a practical feasibility to have in the cloud. 24/7 access. All right. I'll admit it, blessing and curse, right? So yes, I like doing my work at 10 o'clock during the basketball game, but everyone knows I have 24/7 access. So it is great that I can sit on the beach and look up something back at the office. But if someone knows they can send me something from the office and I've got to respond while I'm on vacation, maybe not so great. But as far as the flexibility it provides you and knowing when to put it down and set it aside, it's tremendous because that access does allow you to work anytime, anywhere. As far as customer service, if you are in a medical field where response time is critical, this 24/7 access to your data, either through a remote desktop server or because it's in the cloud, and because you have device independence, can be a literal lifesaver. A little less critical, but still your CPA or your attorney, if you need to reach them for something, you have the ability to do that too. So all of those three things do provide us greater efficiency. For me personally, I am a social person. So when I sit in the office on Mondays and Wednesdays, I do have a tendency to go around and catch up with people. When I work from home, I am at least 50% more efficient because I don't have the same distractions that I have. So for me, the efficiency comes in being able to focus, not having distractions around me, not having outside things to take my focus away from work. Other people, that efficiency may be in time and access. So understand that our efficiency is greater because our availability is greater. So those areas, cloud, remote desktop, 24/7 access, and greater efficiency are some of the flexibility that we've gained during this time where we've learned to use all the tools that we have. So if we look into the next step, and it's really the last piece of our puzzle that we're talking about here today, is planning for the next thing. What is going to happen? And I want to think about that in a couple ways. One simply being what happens the rest of this year. 2022 is a great rebuilding year. It's a great year for catching up. It's a great year for then getting ahead. But I want us to look at that and then look even beyond this year and see what's next. Where's the next big change? What are we going to be needing to look out for, as well as needing to move toward in 23 and 24 and 25 and on into the future? So if we take a look at the results of 2020 and 21, a lot of companies unfortunately went out of business. A lot of companies changed their business model. We talked about more video conferencing for attorneys. We talked about telehealth visit in the healthcare industry. Those are big changes that we've seen. So what we want to do is to take those and take what we lost. Maybe we lost a portion of our business or it was scaled back, but we're able to build up others. How do we bring all of that back? So 61% of companies, so over half of companies, expect we will see revenues increase in the current year. Some of that is making up for lost business. I would contend a big chunk of that is doing just what we mentioned, which is bringing back old parts of the business that took a obvious slowdown and combining with the new tools that we've learned and the new ways we're working, and make us a better, more profitable, more efficient company. All right. Again, over half the companies are also looking to increase their IT budgets, and that we'll talk about reasons for that here in a moment. But it's the same kind of thing. What did we all do in the last 2 years, TCS included? We tightened the belts a little bit. We found ways that we didn't maybe renew everything we should have last year. Maybe we didn't buy those new desktops or laptops that people needed. Maybe we pulled that server out another year beyond where we really would have liked to have replaced it. But what's happening is we're out of time to catch up on that. We're also seeing revenues come back. So over half the companies are looking to increase their IT budgets. The other component we'll talk about here is IT security. There is a cost for safety, if you will. Think about it the same way of the more characters you have in your password, the bigger pain it is, but the more secure you are. It's the same thing with security. The more you put into it, the more secure you are. So I think those are the components that you'll see drive spending in the IT industry over the next year, and then on out in the future beyond that. So hardware refresh, we mentioned it just briefly, and here's what I'm talking about. Your server that you have on site, if it is still on site, probably came with a 5-year warranty from the manufacturer. You can extend that warranty with the manufacturer to 7 years. What's the magic in those two numbers? That's how long they expect the device to last, right? If you get 5 years out of your server, celebrate its good work. It doesn't owe you anything any longer. You can get 2 additional years at a significantly increased price, because the chance of the mortality of that server coming to haunt you in those next 2 years is very significant. Your manufacturers will not do warranties beyond that. There are some third parties that may be a little braver, but there's a reason it's 5 to 7 years. So if you put off that server refresh, it may be time to do it. It may be a great time to look at going to the cloud, doing a hybrid environment, some data in the cloud, database applications locally. Perhaps that database application goes on a remote desktop server so that it is extended out to people sitting outside of your environment, working from home. So I do think servers are a big piece of the refresh that's going to take place this year. The next one is PCs. Same story, 3 to 5 year warranty. As I look at my laptop now, it is 3.5 years old, showing a little bit of wear. Initial warranty has expired on it. You can get warranties on PCs for an additional 2 years. If you're still using that machine after 5 years, again, celebrate it. It doesn't owe you anything. But probably through the pandemic, the past 2 years, we did extend the length of service for those servers and their PCs, right? Maybe time to replace them. Maybe a good time to think about a device that's not a PC exactly. Maybe it's a Surface from Microsoft that is a hybrid between a PC and a tablet. Maybe it is an out-and-out tablet like an iPad, depending on what you need to do, or if you've got a field force, whether it be technicians or salespeople or nurses or whatever you have that's going into the field. But that's another reason that we have to replace a lot of hardware this year. The last category is network equipment. So this is the standard equipment you think of: your switch, your router, your hub. In this case, also, I will mention firewalls specifically. I will also talk about Wi-Fi. So switches, they just sit there and work along and they route traffic. That's great. Okay. As more and more people have fiber, as more and more people getting faster connections, you've got to make sure your switch, you need a gig switch because of the speeds at which your data transits the network. Probably so. The biggest thing to increase the speed on your network is having the right switch in place. So again, if you've put off those purchases and you've got switches that are 5 to 7 years old, good time to look at that. Other network equipment, the routers and things like that, same thing. Depending on how your routers are routing traffic, there have been steps that have been taken there. That may be something to look at. The big category I would like to talk about is firewalls. Firewalls will last physically. They will last for years and years and years. From a technology standpoint, the speed at which the bad actors or the malicious folks or the hackers, whatever term you want to use, the speed at which they are progressing, the speed at which their knowledge and abilities are increasing is so great that if your firewall is more than 3 years old, we would recommend replacing it. You can do a firewall as a service, as you can any of these devices, where you pay a monthly fee and you don't own it, but it's managed for you, which is a great way to make sure you're staying current. You're getting updates to the firmware of that firewall. And also you're making somebody come in and configure that for you and checking that configuration once a quarter. So that's going to be key in security as we move into our security conversation in about a minute. We'll talk about that. But we also want to look at your Wi-Fi access points. Tremendous progress, tremendous, usability, connectivity, the ability to transfer automatically and do that handoff from one to the next without losing a connection is much greater. So we absolutely recommend the newer Wi-Fi systems, access points, increasing that network, extending it out, and then taking advantage of some of the new advancements. So I think hardware refresh is a big part of what we're looking at this year. For a lot of companies, next year would become critical. So if you didn't do anything, even if you did something in 2019, 20 and 21, you didn't do anything. If you don't do it in 22, you're looking at the 4th year by 23. Cloud infrastructure. We've touched on a lot of these, so I will just highlight them briefly. Most everyone is moving or considering some sort of cloud-based email. Okay, this may be through the most popular avenue from Microsoft, which is their Office 365 or Microsoft 365 product. At least, I would say over half of our clients have made that jump. Some of you may not be able to for compliance reasons, but I would suggest we should look into that and find a way to be compliant while we make that jump. You may be doing it using another provider. You may be using Google. and in their G Suite. Same scenario. You're getting this off of your site. It's removing a tremendous security risk, and it keeps you from having to manage an Exchange or other server on site. So I would suggest that. There may be great reasons for keeping it locally. I'd like to look into that. If they're valid, then they're valid for you. If you just like patting that machine on the head, you can do that. Storage. True storage for your backup, for your retaining of data, for keeping documents from whatever your compliance dictates that you have to do. There's almost no reason to do that locally when you can store those files remotely. There is cheap storage, cold storage, if you will, just for keeping documents. Let's say you're in the legal profession, you've got to keep something for 5 to 7 years. Maybe you even have a 10-year retention policy. That doesn't need to be on expensive storage from Microsoft or Google. There are tremendous places out there, where you can't work back and forth, but you certainly can pull down a document very quickly. So I would suggest that. For backup purposes, we do still recommend an on-site backup device. The reason is if you just need to pull a lost email or a file you accidentally deleted, you've got a copy, you can go pull it back immediately, but we recommend another copy of that in the cloud, and then probably a third copy for safety reasons. So we're getting away from all the old tape. We're getting away from SANs and NASs. There's certainly good uses for them today. Many of our clients still have them. Once you're running out of that either storage space or the lifespan of that item, that device, may be time to look at cloud storage as your number one option. Next, we look at our applications. We've talked about this quite a bit already, so I won't hammer it again, but web-based applications are already sitting in the cloud if you're using those. If you're using Salesforce in the cloud, you're already doing that. Many of your applications can either be converted to the web version. Let's say it's QuickBooks, for example, just for accounting. But it may be that some of your business applications you have can be moved to the cloud. Certainly, you can look at remote desktop, even if you have a database-heavy application. So moving those applications into the cloud are a tremendous idea. Last year, servers, like we just spoke about, when it comes time to replace them, I would recommend strongly considering moving into the cloud. As we go through this year, into next year, into the future, that percentage is going to go from around half to more and more and more people who are putting things in the cloud rather than putting servers on site. There may always be a good business case for keeping it local, and that's great. We will help you do that and embrace it. But I think you're going to see over the next few years that percentage of people with at least a hybrid environment is going to increase dramatically. As we wrap up, I want to hit my cybersecurity topic. This is one I typically do about an hour presentation. I promise we will not do that today, but there's just a ton within this particular slide that we could talk about, and I encourage you, give me a call if you want to do so further. Insurance, everyone is getting that renewal now. It's coming with that nice little document with the questions, right? So we've got to be able to answer those questions, and many times we don't know what they mean. I mean, it's not the most clear document that you've ever read. So as you go through that, what it's telling you is there are certain controls that you need to put in place, or else you're going to pay a penalty on your premium. So talk to a client whose premium, they're a small construction company. Their premiums have gone from $3,000 to $15,000 over the past several years. All right, so we are talking about doing a risk assessment for them, seeing which of these controls we can put in place, how to reduce their premium. Now, when I talk about controls, what I mean by that is multi-factor authentication, which is when you get the text that confirms it's really you when you go to log into something. Another control might be your password lengths. We talked about there's an inverse relationship between convenience and security. Sometimes it may be better to have more security, right? Even if it means a little bit of inconvenience for you. So those are the types of controls that you can put into place. And I definitely would recommend you doing that. Devices. Now, this is your PC. This is your server, the cell phone, tablets, anywhere somebody could get to you. We make sure that they are secured, make sure that they're backed up and upgraded to the most recent level. One of the services that we provide is doing those patches, mostly from Microsoft, but every other provider does patches as well. And if you make sure that you are patched and current, you greatly reduce the chance of ransomware or some type of phishing attack. So we've got to make sure that those devices are protected and they are patched. network security. This is a couple of different flavors that this comes in. The firewall that we spoke about earlier is a huge part of that. Not only do you want a personal firewall at home that is generally going to be software based, that allows me to log into my network, but it communicates back with a hardware device for a VPN here in the office. And it's VPN is virtual private network, and that's what it creates. It creates a tunnel from wherever you're sitting at Starbucks at your house or on the beach back into the office. So that's what you're going to get with network security. That's primarily referring to the use of a firewall. We do also want to protect all of your other devices, make sure your ports are closed, make sure that you're using updated switching technology. So we want to be able to do all of that for you, but it begins at home, if you will, by putting a good firewall in place and controlling what comes across that edge from the internet into your company. Compliance is the last piece that we'll talk about today. So, compliance simply means whether it's HIPAA, whether it's SOX, whether it's PCI, there's a government entity that has put restrictions and guidelines on your industry. And if you're able to go through those, fulfill all of those, you're able to work and be productive and be efficient. As soon as you don't comply in one area or another, you're putting business in jeopardy. So one of the things you may use a NIST framework, which is a common security framework used especially in the manufacturing industry. They're not exclusively. Certainly, we mentioned HIPAA and PCI. So depending on what you're doing, this is going to be huge. Making sure that you have someone who can work in that area with you. And as you do that, that compliance helps you hit those controls for your insurance and keep it low. Just as we talked about with security, the EDR, the endpoint detection and response, and the security operations center, those are controls that you're putting in place. They both fulfill compliance needs and insurance needs. So if that's something you need to talk about, love to do that with you as well. So that's the presentation for today. I'd love to take questions. If you think of them now, please put them in the Q&A section. If you have them later, you can feel free to contact me via email or send it to info@tcsusa.com.